Hi folks, welcome to another edition of the Ominous Hour. Let me turn that music down in the background to a more manageable level so you can hear what I'm talking about. Well, welcome back to the Ominous Hour. It's been a while since I've been up. Interesting times they're going through, I would say. Might have been as interesting as the rest of the world has, I think. Today we're going to do a little bit more of a fun talk, not quite so deep as some of the other ones we've been doing, and delve into a topic that I like to talk about often is historical revisionism and digging back through the past to get at what might be some fairly shocking truths about cultural and religious celebrities of the past. Well, let's see. What are we getting at here? Well, let's go to the picture behind me. You see two women who seem to be fairly similar. Same color hair, different ages. One dressed in the raiment of a Trojan or Spartan, Mycenaean princess. One in the raiment of what would appear to be a Roman elite, actually an empress. So if you're guessing along with me, you might recognize that we're talking about Helen of Troy and Helena, or Saint Helena, the mother of Constantine I. What do these interesting women have in common? Okay, so we're going to be, now I'm going to give you the name of this talk and then we'll delve into it. I'm going to call this one The Farce That Launched 1,000 Chits. Hellenic Ancient Alien Relic Hunting. Where am I going with this? Well, if you've been kind of following the esoteric circles lately, you will know that one of the topics being discussed in the ancient alien regime, as well as occult areas, especially revolving around the Templars, is the idea that ancient relics, religious symbols, were actually possibly the way of carrying and trading off-world technology, stuff left behind by UFOs or UAPs. And it seems to be that this is something of a truth. In fact, there are some speculation that some of the aliens who crashed here were basically looking for parts to repair their ships so they could get the hell off of this planet and get back to their home worlds. And that is a truth, and it's been going on for a long time, and it ties to this story of these interesting women and some more connections that I'm going to be introducing to you in just a second. So, let's start looking on the internet at stuff that might be related. Sorry, that's my X page. I'll get away from there pretty quick. As soon as I can find the right tab, we'll get on it. Okay, so let's take a look at what mainstream has to say about this name Helen. It says the name Helen is of a Greek origin, meaning torch or light, and is associated with the Greek word helios. I guess might make some sense, but it seems like a pretty tenuous connection to me. And they claim that it means torch or light or sun or light. And okay, so that sounds like a nice game name for a girl, doesn't it? Well, let's actually look in a different direction here. Let's take a look at what it has to say about Helen. in this Wikipedia page. I'm going to actually read most of this to give you a feeling for what we're dealing with here. Helen, Romanized Helene, also known as Helen of Troy or Helen of Sparta, in Latin is Helena, was a figure in Greek mythology, said to have been the most beautiful woman in the world. She was believed to have been the daughter of Zeus and Leda, or Nemesis. Leda and Nemesis don't sound like the same characters, do they? And this is a clue to where we're going, and we'll see later what's happening with that. Sister of Clytemnestra, another famous bitch, excuse my French. Castor Pollux, who you know as the Gemini twins, Philonoe and Phoebe, and Timandra. He was married first to King Menelaus of Sparta, who became by her the father of Hermione, according to others, of Nicostratus also. So apparently that was not his first marriage. Her subsequent marriage to Paris of Troy, well, was that a marriage? I don't actually think that was a marriage. That was a shacking up, if you will. But this seems to be the way they want to tell it these days. Was the most immediate cause of the Trojan War. Elements of reputed biography come from classical authors such as Aristophanes, Cicero, Euripides, and Homer, in both the Iliad and the Odyssey. Her story reappears in Book 2 of Aeneid's Virgil's Aeneid. In her youth, she was abducted by Theseus. The competition between her suitors for her hand in marriage saw Menelaus emerge victorious. All of her other suitors were required to swear an oath, known as the Oath of Tyndareus, promising to provide military assistance to the winning suitor if Helen were ever stolen from him. The obligations of the oath precipitated the Trojan War. When she married Menelaus, she was still very young. In most accounts, including Homer's, Helen ultimately fell in love with Paris and willingly went to Troy with him, though there are also stories that she was abducted by force. The legends of Helen during her time in Troy are contradictory. Homer depicts her ambivalently, both regretful of her choice and sly in her attempts to redeem her public image. Other accounts have a treacherous Helen, who stimulated Bacchic rites. This is something's kind of key here. Bacchic rites are the mystery cult, the wild cult of the goddess Pan, or Dionysus, or Bacchus. And again, these were rites that maybe the celebrant god was a male, but actually the god they were worshiping was a female. The dark triple goddess female, that is the one that was purportedly in this golden age of rule by the matriarchy, the great goddess. Robert Graves calls her the white goddess. And is rejoiced in the carnage she caused. In some versions, Helen does not arrive in Troy, but instead waits out the war in Egypt. Interesting connection there. Why would that be part of the legend? Ultimately, Paris was killed in action, and in Homer's account, Helen was reunited with Menelaus, though other versions of the legend recount her ascending to Olympus instead. A cult associated with her developed in Hellenistic Laconia, both at Sparta and elsewhere. At Therapne, she shared a shrine with Menelaus. She was also worshipped in Attica and on Rhodes. So this gal got around. Her beauty inspired artists of all times to represent her, frequently as a personification of ideal human beauty. Images of Helen started appearing in the 7th century BC. In classical Greece, her elopement or abduction was a popular motif. In medieval illustrations, this event was frequently portrayed as a seduction, whereas in Renaissance paintings, it was usually depicted as a rape. Christopher Marlowe's lines from his tragedy Dr. Faustus are frequently cited. Was this the face that launched 1,000 ships? Thence my tongue-in-cheek name, the farce that launched 1,000 Chits, and burnt the topless towers of Ilium. Etymology. Let's see if they have anything to add here. The etymology of Helen's name continues to be a problem for scholars. Just as I said, it's not as straightforward as they would lead you to believe. In the 19th century, George Curtius related Helen to the moon, Selene. Helene. Aha. That seems like a better connection than relating it to the sun, Helios, which is always depicted as a male figure. But two early dedications to Helen in Laconian dialect of ancient Greek spell her name with an initial digamma. Galeen? Jilene? Jilene Maxwell, come on down! We found a connection to Helen of Troy in you, which rules out any etymology originally starting with simple S. No, not necessarily. The gyrations of the alphabet are many and obscure and quite interesting to the story of mankind. In the early 20th century, Emile Boissac considered Helena to derive from the well-known noun Eleon, meaning torch. It has also been suggested that the lambda of Eleon arose from an original V, and thus the etymology name would be connected with the root of Venus. Interesting, too, that the lambda looks a little bit like an upside-down Y, which is the center of the peace symbol, which we've talked about before as being kind of a false flag symbol of Lilith, the archdemon ladyboy that will love you a long time until you're lulled into a daze, comfortable numbness, and then take your soul. So we're finding out the connections here that are quite interesting with this whole Helen thing. More recently, Otto Skutch has advanced the theory the name Helen might have two separate etymologies, which belong to different mythological figures respectively, namely Selena, related to the Sanskrit Svarana, the shining one, and Selena, the first Spartan goddess, connected to one or the other natural light phenomenon. Sister of the Dioscuri and another vegetation goddess worked in Therapne as Helena de Dendritos, Helen of the trees. Yes, Helena Dendritos. That means that, yeah, my Greek is coming back to me. Others have connected the name's etymology to a hypothetical Proto-Indo-European sun goddess, noting the name's connection to the word for sun in various Indo-European cultures, including the Greek proper word for God and God for the sun, Helios. In particular, her marriage myth may be connected to the broader Indo-European marriage drama of the sun goddess, as she is related to the divine twins, just as many of these goddesses are. Well, this is interesting because that presents another common Trinity theme, which is kind of the strongest female trinity of the mother with two twins. If you remember, the root myth of Rome was a mother wolf who raised the twins Romulus and Remus. So this is another myth of that shape and probably has the same basic origin and reflects this struggle between basically religions of female-oriented pantheons and trinities, and male-oriented ones, or ones that deny the female altogether. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Doesn't sound like there's a female there. Well, the female is the Holy Spirit, but that was downplayed by Christianity out of fear of these old pagan religion, love, death goddess versions coming back. They came back anyway through the Mary cult, which is kind of an odd twist on Christianity. You just can't seem to ditch the bitch. Let's see, prehistoric and mythological context. I think we're gonna skip a little bit here. Mythology, I don't think we need to go into that, so we may come back to it. Yeah, she had a fun life now, didn't she? There's something down near the bottom here I think I was going to cover. In Egypt, at least 3 ancient Greek authors denied that Helen ever went to Troy. Instead, they suggested Helen stayed in Egypt during the Trojan War. Those 3 authors are Euripides, Stesichorus, and Herodotus. Interesting, because Herodotus is more of a historian and probably would have told the story that made the most sense from a historical standpoint. What was going on in Egypt at this time was an interesting set of events, because this is roughly the period when Egypt produced the prince Thutmose the fifth, who would have been the 5th, that is the real Moses. So here we're linking in other streams of this messianic mess that may be interesting. Herodotus adds weight to the Egyptian version of events by putting forward his own evidence. He traveled to Egypt and interviewed the priests of the temple for an Aphrodite. So this again ties Helen to the love goddess. According to these priests, Helen had arrived in Egypt shortly after leaving Sparta because strong winds had blown Paris' ship off course. King Proteus, again an interesting name because that also is used in Shakespeare, The Tempest, of Egypt, appalled that Paris had seduced his host's wife and plundered his host's home in Sparta, disallowed Paris from taking Helen to Troy. Paris returned to Troy without a new bride, but the Greeks refused to believe that Helen was in Egypt and not within Troy's walls. Thus, Helen waited in Memphis for 10 years while the Greeks and Trojans fought. Following the conclusion of the Trojan War, Menelaus sailed to Memphis, where Proteus reunited him with Helen. Oh, actually, the other thing I was looking for is coming from a different Helen. Okay, so that's Helen of Troy. Now, we don't see a lot of evidence of anything associated with artifacts in particular, but this story of being in Egypt and them still going to Troy kind of smells like it wasn't really Helen they were after. And my suspicion is the true story was that Paris went after Helen for some artifacts that she had that they wanted to steal to take to their temple in Troy. So he seduced her, got her to Egypt, and then made off with the relics back to Troy. And she, chilled out there till the war was over. And Menelaus took a little side trip back down to Egypt to pick her up on his way home. Now, in that era, there was a lot of boat traffic. There was a lot of stuff going on. If she was not in Troy, they would have known about it after 10 frickin' years, wouldn't they? So I think that lends a little bit more credence to my idea that there was something a little bit weird going on here. Also, the story of the golden apple. And that's where an artifact sort of comes into the picture. This apple that Helen was supposedly awarded for judging between the 3 goddesses was the gift of Aphrodite, and could well be a vestigial memory of some artifact that was left with a semi-divine, basically Anunnaki hybrid that became a very powerful personage in history after that. These hybrids, in my way of thinking, were the source of what we refer to as the undead. The mixture of their blood with these alien Elohim caused them to have, this was the giants, the Nephilim, caused them to have this mixed characteristic that gave them very, very long lifespans and unusual powers, i.e., like werewolves, vampires, all sorts of undead creatures that have been flitting in and out of our history for a long, long time. Let's see. I think we're gonna get off of Helen here and then look at the next one, Helena. Well, interesting enough, quite a while after this, we come upon this strange emperor who saw the vision of the Christogram and won the Battle of the Million Bridge, and decided as a result of that to make Christianity the state religion of Rome instead of the normal worship, which was that of Yahweh, and the old gods, but also kind of a set of new gods that were sort of the virtues and the muses. And if you look in the coinage, we've talked about this before, you look in the coinage of the imperial period from about the time that Rome encountered the cultures of the Jewish people, the Yahweh culture. They shifted their name of their god from being Jupiter, Zeus Pater, in other words, a Latinized version of Zeus, to being Yahweh, a Latinized version of Yahweh. Okay, so actually, the Roman Empire was Christian. They were a polytheistic Christian that was basically virtufying the old gods and goddesses. So instead of having a goddess Juno or Hera or Aphrodite, Venus, or etc., they were creating goddesses mostly in the form of kind of following the form of Apollo and the Muses. Only instead of the Muses, being of the arts and sciences, they still worshiped those and they still revered them, but they created new ones that were virtues that actually survive a little bit in the three graces that, when added to the 9 muses, give you a pantheon of 12 lesser goddesses that are kind of the assistants of God. And again, this is all ties into how religion evolved. Religions evolve. They're not created, they don't die, they evolve as religious thought evolves. Because consciousness creates reality. Our ideas of the gods and goddesses create the gods and goddesses, create new ones, or give old ones new attributes, new powers, or divide their powers. And that's essentially what God had in mind when he made the simulation multiverse. That this would be a way of raising other gods and goddesses to his level of creative awareness so that they could share power, so that there would not be an almighty tyrant lording it over God's planet, Earth. Okay, so this ties together all mythologies, which is essentially what I like to do as an omnist, is figuring out, well, let's not throw every other religion out but my own. Let's figure out what the common themes are and how the evolutionary nature of them leads toward a conclusion of a divine plan. Okay, so Helen is an interesting person. There's some things I want to mention here that you may not have noticed before. Her name, Flavia Julia Helena. So this ties her to the Flavian gens and the Julian patrician family, two very old ones. In fact, the two oldest, the ones that I've talked to you before about being the source of the two attempts made to make Rome into a King of Kings dynasty. The first attempt was Caesar's marriage to Cleopatra and their son Caesarion, who, if he had taken over the Roman Empire after Caesar, would have kind of established Rome as being more of an Eastern potentate than it was until it became so, kind of towards the era of Diocletian, just before Constantine. The Flavian clan is the clan of Vespasian, which is where the second attempt to breed Western and Eastern bloodlines to make a King of Kings line in Rome under the new emperor after the dust had settled from Nero's assassination, Vespasian. And as I've told you before, you could go check this. His son Titus, who was helping him in the conquest of or the put down of the Jewish revolt in 70 AD-ish, was the big hero of Josephus' book about the Jewish wars. And Josephus made no doubt, no bones about the fact that he thought the Vespasian line were the messiahs, that Titus was the Messiah because he took over after Vespasian went to become emperor, and was kind of the son, the Prince of Peace, because he finished the putting down of the rebellion and set Israel up, set Judea up with a new government and new administrators and so forth, and got it going again. Not for very long, because we know there were other revolts after that, such as the Bar Kokhba revolt, almost 100 years later. At any rate, Titus was supposed to have married Berenice, who was the granddaughter of Herod the Great. The Herodian dynasty was also very closely tied to the Julio-Claudians, especially to the family of Agrippa, Augustus's best friend. And in fact, one of Herod's children, or was it grandchildren, I forget, was named Herod Agrippa and became the titular, the client king of that area for a brief time later on. And we've talked about that elsewhere. I believe that line, this again ties into the Robertian prophecy, because Rad Bart is the origin name of Robert. Rad Bart, Herod Bart. The Bart part comes from Ptolemy, Bartholomeus. And that combination of names ties together the Ptolemaic dynasty with the Herodian dynasty, and it continued in the West. Never quite made it to the throne until Constantine, whose mother was, again, Helena. Now, supposedly she was born in the lower classes, maybe in the city of Drepanum, Bithynia in the east. This is going to get interesting here pretty soon, because it looks like that origin was made up. Other sources put her place of origin, maybe, where is this? in the West. Let's find this. Here we go, and it ties together some other interesting stuff that we kind of need to talk about from time to time. So here, both Geoffrey of Monmouth and Henry of Huntingdon, two Welsh writers later on, promoted a popular tradition that Helena was a British princess and the daughter of Old King Cole from the area of Colchester, which is where that got that name. This led to later dedication of 135 churches in England to her, mainly in the area of Yorkshire. Again, ties to the House of York. This is a much more plausible origin than that she came from Bithynia, because if you know about her husband, Constantius I, had been made the one of the co-emperors under the Tetrarchy of Diocletian, where they had two Augusti and two Caesars as the higher order rulers of the East and West, and the lower order rulers of the East and West. And that was sort of a not so successful, but a good stab at trying to divide power in an empire that was too unwieldy for one leader to get around and deal with all the problems. His part of the empire was the West. He had Gaul and Spain and England, Britannia. And it's not clear how long he was there before he was promoted, but you can damn sure bet that he was promoted because he was already well known in the West and still let's see, let's look a little bit at his background. Let's see if we can find out a little bit more about Flavius Valerius Constantius. Now you notice he's got the Flavius too, which means that he and his wife were both given that Flavian cognomen. Maybe that was what came from his side, and what it came from her side was the Julian blood, which, interesting story, there are a lot of suspicions that the Julio-Claudian line did not necessarily die out. There were members of the family that escaped all the purges and backstabbing, which if you ever get a chance to read or watch the old BBC series I, Claudius, you will find very interesting. My suspicion is that Postumus, surnamed Agrippa, was one of the escapees. Maybe was supposed to have been killed, but was substituted, which very frequently happened when you survived an assassination attempt. One of the ways to make sure you keep surviving is to flee and to disfigure a slave and claim that slave was the person that was supposed to have been killed, and the assassination was successful. That's a trick that's been used many, many times throughout history, so it's a well-known kind of Machiavellian strategy to keep your line going when you've had a major defeat in these dynastic struggles, the Game of Thrones kind of struggles. Okay, so let's see, what does it say about him? He was also of humble origin. A distinguished military career, rose to the top ranks of the army. 289, he set aside Helena, so this is before he actually became emperor. Perhaps, he served as Caesar from 293 to 305. So this 289 divorce of Helena could well have been they did. They wanted him to ditch her and marry a daughter of the Emperor Maximian, kind of tying him into the elite dynasty that was already going. But I have a suspicion that he was already part of a women's line dynasty, similar to how Vespasian came to power. We've talked a lot about that in other segments, but I'll just give you a brief rundown. Vespasian came from not a very special family and was the second son of a father who had spent much of his adult life as a tax collector in Asia Minor. And if you know anything about tax collectors in those days, they didn't go with their wives. They didn't go with their family because it was a very dangerous profession. You were basically wringing money out of provinces that were still somewhat rebellious. And it was a dangerous assignment to be a tax collector. They went around with armed soldiers wherever they went to protect them from the local populace who didn't like paying taxes to Rome. So when they would take these long assignments, they would absolutely have concubines and even second wives. It was very, very common for the locals, elite, to marry one of their elite bloodline children into the family of these Roman dignitaries, so that, if on the odd chance that their Roman children didn't survive or didn't produce children, they might essentially inherit into the Roman elite. So it was extremely common for these taxpayer and praetor characters that were assigned to the provinces to have second families. And it was expected of a Roman matron that they would accept the children of those marriages as their own and often raise them as their own. And that's what I believe happened with Vespasian, because his career really reads very strange. Like some of the other characters that are associated with his rise to power, such as Josephus, who was an odd character in going from being one of the leaders of the Jewish revolt, assigned with a pretty important position to defend, to being the last survivor of that position, who was supposed to commit suicide but didn't, turned himself into Vespasian and became Vespasian's official historiographer of his war, and added to his family. So that's how Josephus became Flavius Josephus. Very suspicious. My suspicion is he was already related to the family, and Vespasian already had a lot of contacts in the West, which makes sense because he was known as being the most successful mule driver, not a driver himself, but basically a person who bred mules and organized caravans. This was a very, very lucrative career in Rome, but looked down on because you had to deal with slaves and mule drivers and organizing caravans and making good relationships with the people on the other end. It was kind of looked down on by the rich Romans, who made most of their money off of slaves tending their estates in Italy. At any rate, when you put it all together, you have a number of families that sort of maintain dynastic ambitions all through the Roman Empire, even after it sort of started falling apart. Valerius is another one. Valerian was the last sort of normal Roman emperor before this horrible bunch of years where you had, basically there was like a period of about 50 years from about 250 AD where you had literally a new emperor every year or two. They just couldn't keep the empire nearly collapsed during that time. Valerian was one of the last ones before things really got bad. And then things were kind of set up again to a better state by Diocletian, just before the advent of Constantine. Okay, so let's see if they say anything. Humble origins, it doesn't say where he was born, but presumably, okay, let's see. Upon becoming a senior commander, he led a command against the Picts. And so definitely there's nothing in his, let's see what it says of his early career. He was an Illyrian, it says, born in Nisus. That's kind of a border province between the east and the west. In fact, it was in Moesia Superior, which is actually part of the Dacian area. So he may not have actually been Roman at all. He may have been a Dacian, which is, their tribes were Germanic and had been Celtic, kind of that transition. They mix with both those bloodlines. So he may have been a nobleman of that era that kind of rose through the ranks and became a Roman, which was very frequent to happen in those days. Let's see, a member of the Protectores Augustri Nostri. You have to take a lot of this stuff with a grain of salt because it's based upon propaganda. When somebody is invited into a family, sometimes they want to play up where they came from, and sometimes they want to bury it. In this case, I think they wanted to bury the fact that he was actually not a Roman, that he was a barbarian, at least by birth. And that's why they made up this idea that, he came from humble birth. Okay, well, most people of humble birth in the empire, they were humble because they didn't have citizenship, or they had the lowest kind of citizenship that didn't confer ability to sit on any of the assemblies or anything in Rome. Says he did fight in the east against the secessionist Palmyrene Empire. It really doesn't give any idea of how he met this Helen. So, the jury's kind of out on that. But knowing what I know about the way that the Welsh stories of history have been repressed and put down and called pure fiction, when it's now coming forward, there's some very good YouTube channels on this of the latest investigations into the true history of Wales, that it's very clear Rome and later on the Anglo-Saxons and later on the Normans wanted to sort of destroy the older history of Britain, which tied the Britons that remained in Wales and Ireland to Egypt, of all places. Let's go back to Helena. So Helena is famous for basically after Constantine took over and Christianized the empire. She was known to basically, she's the one that went to the Holy Land and built a bunch of churches and gathered together all sorts of relics and started this whole obsession with holy relics that, as far as we know, didn't really exist in Christianity before. And it became kind of a whole major fixture of the Catholic religion, which was not in any way part of the Gospels, part of the Jesus tradition. This is typical of how these alien, shape-shifting, undead characters would work within humanity. Now, I'm not certain of this, but I have this little suspicion that this Helena and the Helen of Troy were one and the same. There are a number of families or people you can follow throughout history that just don't seem to die. One of the famous ones you can go research is the Count Saint-Germain, who is this probably the latest example of somebody that they believe he was an undead. He was basically living forever and then just moving somewhere else and taking up a new name, a new backstory, and keeping his money safe by basically pretending to be his own heir and banking with the Shylocks and Hanseatic merchants, who were kind of the bankers of the era, who would be more than happy to look the other way in order to keep the use of your funds in return for keeping them safe. That's how banking worked in those days. They didn't give out interest. They kept the money safe when you needed it and loaned to other folks who didn't have money and then made money off that. That was banking in those days. Not the same as banking today, at least the way it was supposed to be, where, okay, you got my money, do something with it for me, because it's going to be as safe there as it's going to be in my own safe at home. Things were a lot less safe in those days. At any rate, a whole bunch of relics originated with this Helena that are coming to the fore again now. Some of the particular ones were slivers of the spear that pierced Christ's breast, little bits of Christ's blood. The Shroud of Turin was also supposedly one of the things that Helene found and took back to Italy to become the very famous relic it is. It's really interesting to look at this from the context of an ancient alien standpoint. And it actually was. I haven't actually watched it yet, but when I started looking into this, I thought I'd see if there was any documentaries. And sure enough, Ancient Aliens did one on mysterious relics. So that might be worth a watch if you find this subject interesting. I'm probably going to try to find see if I can find it on YouTube or something like that and take a look at that. It's probably related. Also, you might have been following lately, or you might like to follow, the Grand Master of the Templars is doing a lot of expose, basically giving sort of an apologist view of what the Templars have been doing, which I find rather funny because I'm not too impressed with the Templars. And I think that they have dirty connections to the fundamentalist forces of Islam and the cult of Kali, Shiva in India. They are part of a counterculture movement that is trying to undermine traditional religion. That's why there's so much animosity between the Pope and the Templars. Now, I'm not saying I like the Pope any better. I think he is absolutely Antichrist, as was predicted with the papal prophecy. So, a lot of things falling into place right now. But let's just go one more place here, kind of tying into the idea that Helen may have been a British princess. There's also oops, here we go. Where is it? there's also a Norse goddess named Hel, who is the goddess of the underworld, the goddess of death, which again ties back to this idea of the triple goddess. The triple goddess being the young and beautiful love goddess, the matronly queen of the gods, middle-aged one, and the old, decrepit, undead, zombie-ish goddess of the dead. Let's see what we can find about this Hel, a female being in Norse mythology. Now, the thing is that most people say that Norse mythology only goes back to the Middle Ages or a little bit before the Middle Ages. I don't buy that bullshit. I think that Norse mythology, Germanic mythology, goes back much further, but was kind of suppressed to make it seem like, oh, these were just copies of what was going on in Greco-Roman and Persian and other places to kind of downgrade the Germanic tribes and the Celtic tribes to be more barbarians than they actually were. See, Hel is attested in the Poetic Edda compiled in the 13th century from earlier traditional sources, and the Prose Edda, referred to as the daughter of Loki, another interesting character that is kind of ties Hel to the dark side of Norse mythology. Loki is the trickster god, if you remember, and corresponds to the Greco-Roman Hermes or Mercury. Not necessarily a good guy. Tying back even further to the Egyptian Thoth, which the Templars would like to say Thoth is a great guy, that giving him knowledge and blah blah blah, but easy knowledge is dangerous knowledge. And this is a theme that kind of goes through all this. These relic hunters, these folks wanting to gather these things to gain power, don't necessarily know how to use it, and often abuse it. And even, the undead are multi-generational. They aren't the original ones that were left here by their ancestors. They're still hoping to repair the ships of their ancestors so they can get off this planet, because they don't really like having to hide in the middle of humanity. Most of them. Some of them have grown used to it and use and abuse their position here. And this all ties into what's going on today with the orbs and drones. Okay, these orbs and drones are here as part of this whole ongoing battle over this planet, over who owns it, who is the chosen species, who is God. All of these alien species, who, like the ones who think they created humanity, the Elohim or the Anunnaki, they didn't actually create humanity. They recreated a DNA line that had gone extinct. Humanity has been here since forever because God planned himself as a human. All of the prophecies of his awakening were prophecies of this day today. And actually, what's been going on in the simulation multiverse has been repeating this one special generation over and over and over until the version of space-time that it leads to has no limit, is always continuously adding more content, which is essentially where we got in 2022 when the James Webb Space Telescope started showing us all these red dot placeholders, impossibly old red dot objects that confound cosmologists and are basically killing off the Big Bang Theory. That is a sign that we finished this experiment. The Genesis story of Earth, the Gaia experiment that I talk about. Okay? And so we need to now go back and explore what really happened, because it probably not exactly what we think happened, because the mythology, the history that we have, was based on a previous run of the simulation. The run that we're on, a run where the Messiah didn't live long enough for that special event to happen, didn't awaken enough for that expansion of space-time to happen. Now, the new versions of space-time, as we've talked about before, have to, in as much as possible, integrate with the previous versions. Otherwise, you get these weird Mandela effects. And we have seen some major weird Mandela effects. That's how we got the name, the Mandela effect, because there are many people who remember absolutely certain that Mandela died in prison before he became the leader of South Africa. And yet, in this timeline, we know he did become the leader of South Africa, led it to independence and to the shithole state that it is now, that is so racist against whites that they are, I really hate what's going on down there. My brother was part of it, not actually in South Africa, but he was in Zimbabwe, which has the same problem. He spent half of his life trying to help them build up their oil industry, and then they came along and they took everything he had and nearly killed him. They took his ranch, they took all his equipment, and he was lucky to get out of the country with his life. This is how they treat white people in South Africa. Like they're nothing. Like the Jews were treated in Nazi Germany. Like Uyghurs and Falun Gong are treated in China today. This is evil. Okay? These are evil people. They're not defending their race. They're not, I don't know, getting restitution for something somebody did wrong. No. They've been there for generations. They're all mixed up over there, and they're now using the color of their skin as a badge of honor to be able to go, steal and beat up white people. And that's happening in the United States too. It's insane. It's happening in Europe now. It's insane. It is evil. And anybody who buys into that bullshit, same thing with the whole Palestinian thing. The Palestinians don't own Israel, you fucking idiots. The Palestinian state was Jordan. They made 3 states, actually 4 states, when the European powers decided that they didn't want to directly rule the Middle East. Well, actually 5 states. Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. Israel was for the Jews. Lebanon was for the Christians, because there was still a large Christian group there remaining from the Crusader time. All that time, hundreds of years. Okay? Egypt was one of the Arab states, primarily Arabic / North African. Okay? Jordan was supposed to be the Palestinian state. They gave them the best king that they could because they were used to being ruled by kings. King Hussein of Jordan is a Palestinian king. Their capital, their hereditary capital, is Petra, which is the Palestinian natural capital, not Jerusalem, which was never the capital of anything like Palestine. These people are sick, evil people trying to kill Jews, just as bad as Hitler. and you know who you are. I've had a lot of people on this channel diss me and disconnect from me because, oh, the Palestinians, I feel so sorry for them. You aren't aware that those bastards are making up fake news. They are dressing up children to look like they've been hurt by Israel. They are all the time that try to paint Israel as a genocider. Fuck that. The Palestinians are supported by Iran, who has genocided all sorts of groups within Iran. They persecute Christians. They persecute their own Persian people who don't want to kowtow to Islam and the draconian government of the Ayatollahs. They're not the good guys. I'm sorry. Iran are not the good guys. Palestine are not the good guys. And they're all basically funded by Russia and China. And they are not the good guys. Putin is a fucking ex-KGB oligarch. He's not an elected official. He's not a president. You don't win your presidential elections by 95% every time you have an election unless you're fucking cheating. Okay? That's what's really going on in Russia. It is not a democracy, you fucking morons. China is not a democracy. They have one-party elections where the party picks the candidates and only the party people get to vote. That's not a democracy. China is an evil place. It is ruled by evil people. They have an evil ideology that is anti-God. That's what communists are. They are atheists. They allow religion to persist a little bit in China. It's all a fake. It's all a sham. They've only allowed a few of the most famous and beautiful mosques to stay operational and stay kept up, and they use those as dog and pony shows for idiots that go visit Xinjiang and want to see the Silk Road. It's all fucking bullshit. Fake as a $3 bill. Same thing with other Muslim areas there. I mean, the Uyghurs in Xinjiang are only one of many Muslim minority. The province of Ningxia is Muslim. Other provinces are Muslim, or at least significantly Muslim, or were significantly Muslim, because China was ruled for quite a while by a dynasty that was Mongol. Now, the Mongols didn't start out as Muslim, but they converted to Muslim, and they took that religion with them. That's why where I'm sitting right now, Indonesia, is a Muslim majority country. Okay, it happened because of the Mongols that spread that far. And yet, the Chinese are trying to take credit for the Mongols. They sort of just assimilated their heroes and their technology, and they call it all Han now. It's fucking bullshit. The Han didn't invent it squat. The Han people were a bunch of steppe barbarians, not much different than the Mongols. And they lorded it over the more cultured, developed, many multicultural China that used to be. And there are still 20 or 30 minority groups in China that are still very distinct. And the Han look down on them because they've got darker skin than us beautiful Beijingers. That's what happens in China. China is an incredibly racist place. Far more racist than the USA, yet their propaganda is making you think that the USA is racist. It's fucking bullshit. Anyway, I think that's all I wanted to get into here. You've really got to take what's going on anywhere in modern, medieval, ancient, super ancient history with a grain of salt, because virtually everybody who covers these topics has a modern political agenda. a revisionist agenda. I'm going to mention one name of a person that I really don't like, two people that I don't like their agenda. Paul Wallace, an apostate Anglican priest who is preaching this nonsense that there's nothing to religion, it's all just about aliens. And the Bible is not really the Bible, it's not a religion, it's an alien book. And he keeps writing book after book after book that somehow get lots of copies bought, and is one of the darlings of the Gaia channel, which is a bunch of bullshit, new age, revisionist crap. And, he doesn't get shadow banned. He doesn't get dowranked. He doesn't get his episodes pulled because they said something that Google doesn't like, unlike channels like mine. Another one, Billy Carson. At least he's finally getting some comeuppance from Christians, even though they have problems with their dogma. They're calling him out on, basically scamming off of Zechariah Sitchin's work, which is kind of what Paul Wallace does too, without really having the deep background of, okay, well, why did all this happen? Why were the scriptures so popular if they were just a bunch of bullshit? They're not. They're all part of a story, the greatest story ever told, because this mythology was all created for this special time, this special generation, and was added to as this Messiah's life was lived over and over and over again. And that life started from the very beginning, from the creation of the first dimension, time. Time is on God's side because God created time. The first dimension was where all the first stories happened. They were very linear stories, one-dimensional stories that filled out a story of a timeline. The timeline of God's life and other incarnations he was going to have to flesh out this expanding virtual reality. Okay? The second experiment added a second dimension, time and one dimension of space. Now you've got basically kind of a snake universe where you've got a temporal dimension in which snaky linear characters can exist, creating other stories that kind of lend themselves to the snake mythology. The third dimension gives you the flat earthers world. And flat earthers are old souls. That's why they think flat earth. They can't believe the world is round because that does not compute for them. Okay, they are holdovers. They are characters that were created in that 2D land of early creation. 2D plus time. So essentially it is a 3D reality, but with the third dimension as being time. They're not wrong per se. They are right from the point of view of their background, because they are characters that grew up in that version of space-time and were kept in this version of space-time because they didn't need to be deleted. They may not have an important part to play, but they did play an important part in those earlier versions of creation. So they're here. They're getting an opportunity to learn and grow, which is what it's all about. God wants every soul to have the opportunity to learn and grow at their own speed, in their own way. And if they go bad, Okay, then when we have a spiritual apocalypse, which is what we're coming into, a big one right now, that's what the orb arc ships are gathering for. Those bad apples are going to be strewn all around the universe, far enough away from God's planet that if they don't have a wormhole, they're never going to see God for a long time. And, you know, the battle is going to continue, but once these others are banished, it's going to be a lot easier to establish local superiority of God's team here in and around Earth. We're in the process of preparing to banish all the evil souls, right? At least the ones that we don't want to keep around, because we want them to be part of the medalist round of the Antichrist Olympics. Or we will take the evilest souls that have caused the most pain and suffering and find out if they're actually demons, if they're actually cryptids, if they're actually aliens. Here, time-traveling interlopers, perhaps, there's some of those still around here, they're going to be banished to their own universes. That's what exorcism is. It's not killing them, it's sending them where they belong. And where if they're in another universe, they're damn sure not going to get back here unless God allows it. Okay? If they get sent across the universe, then okay, they're going to continue their Genesis story and still have a chance at redemption. That's kind of the cutoff point. Beast marking isn't as bad if you stay in this universe as it would be if you were sent to the abyss, one of the universes that have no escape. I think that's all I wanted to cover today. I hope I didn't. Let's see how we're doing time-wise. Give me time to think of anything else I wanted to cover. I hope you found that interesting. I hope you found things that you might want to investigate more, find your own synchronicities in. Because what I cover is what appeals to me, what seems to tie into my story. And everybody's story is different. I have his story. You have your story, which may be a her story or a his story. But you need to start investigating these things, because that is how you're going to find out who you are post-apocalypse. No matter where you land, whatever you have left of your incarnation, your current incarnation, you'd be well spent to try to figure out where you've been and where you're going. Now, many of you are first-timers, newbie, non-player character that were just added for color in this run of the simulation. That's not anything derogatory, okay? I know some people use that in a derogatory manner, and even I am guilty of that once in a while. A non-player character is actually somewhat fortunate because they've got a clean slate. They may have landed a shit incarnation this time where they were dirt poor and stuck in a country without much opportunity. But if they play their cards right, they have much more flexibility in what they can do with their life and where they can go in the next life. And you'll see, you know, I see that all over here in Indonesia. There are people that are just blindly living out an NPC existence, not being satisfied with enough food and enough stuff to get by, but, you know, just like driven to have more material goods and wealth when it's meaningless. And I see other people who are really making an effort to grow out of that NPC state, who have been open to having spiritual experiences and processing them and having the dark nights of the soul. Those are the characters that are going to advance. not the NPC clip characters. Okay, if you go through an incarnation as an NPC and you don't learn anything, all you do is what your character was programmed to do, you're not going to get any points. You're not going to get any karma points. And at the end of your life, nobody's going to really want to take you into their afterlife, except for the adversary who just wants to milk all the spiritual energy they can and, milk you for more energy, kind of like the Matrix movie. That's not a place you want to go. Nor really is reassimilating with Source, who isn't going to punish you or anything or milk your energy, but is just going to take your image, copy it into their Akashic record database, and wipe your memory and throw you back into the next non-player character situation that comes up. Okay, if you want to be a perennial red shirt in Star Trek, that's kind of what you got going. If you decide, I'm just gonna, kind of like the being there existence. I like to watch, or the Forrest Gump existence, where you just float around like a feather in the breeze, doing whatever you seem to be programmed to do at the time, and not really wondering why. Okay, those are not positive role models for you. It may have been a nice fantasy to watch Forrest Gump and imagine yourself as, wow, these incredible things are going to happen to me. I'm going to win a lottery. I'm going to have all this stuff happen. I'm going to own the Bubba Gump Shrimp Company. Okay, well, that does happen. But it happens because that character was supposed to have that happen. And it rarely happens because you're flat out doing everything you can to accumulate money. More often what happens when you follow the materialistic urges of your life is you get into debt, you get compromising situations, business deals that you wish you hadn't gotten involved in, like the whole Diddy scandal that's going on right now. Other scandals happening that Doge is exposing. It's not a good place, okay? So I would advise you to try to live minimally, materialistically, and try to live maximally spiritually, because that's how you're going to learn the most. Take some chances, yes, but take the right chances. Take chances to better yourself, not just get another car or another in the bigger house. It's so banal what people are doing with their lives. And then, now they're focusing on, we hate Tesla, we're going to go destroy Teslas. How stupid are they? These folks are fucking zombies. Their hate is so strong that they can't think straight. And this, again, emphasizes the dark side of giving over your life to the heart brain. Okay? Love is not the universal, folks. That's not the most important thing. God is not love. God is maybe tough love, tough parenting, that knows that you can't just hand out everything everybody wants, or they will get spoiled and fat and stupid, as Americans have. And I know I've been through it myself. I'm on my second round now. My first round, I was about 40. No, come on, don't screen save on me right now. I was about 40, and I was extremely overweight. I weighed about 25, 30 pounds more than I do now, and I felt like shit. And I wanted to end my life because I hated my work. I hated my marriage. I loved my children, but now they were getting to be teenagers and weren't any fun anymore. They were off fooling around, doing smoking pot and getting in trouble and all sorts of things like that. And I was really at a low ebb. And miraculously, I found myself drug into the world of acting through my kids who had gotten into it. And that was like, I never imagined that I could do that. I hated performing. I mean, I played the violin as a child, and I hated performing, so I never gave recitals. I did play some with my older brother, Peter, in Pike Place, when he would invite me to play the viola part, when he was getting together with his friends and they couldn't find a viola. So I did do some performing, but I really didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy the tension and everything. And then suddenly I get pulled on the stage as the butler Franz in The Sound of Music. Because my kids, my son Oliver had gotten into the production as Kurt. And I was sitting there, you know, I had to take him to rehearsals every night. I was sitting there reading a book in the corner when the director comes up. Hey, you're Oliver's dad, aren't you? And I said, yeah. And he says, you know what? The guy that was supposed to play the butler didn't show up today. So could you just read the lines for us, please? I said, well, yeah, sure, why not? So I played Franz the butler one night. The next night, same story. By the end of the week, as Scott, the director, was saying, you know, I don't think the guy's going to show up. Would you just play this one eensy-weensy little part? And I thought, I could probably handle that. That'd be kind of funny to be up on stage and, you know, with my son. So I played Franz the butler. And I enjoyed it so much that 2 shows later, I was Alfred Doolittle in My Fair Lady with my daughter, Talia, in the chorus. And within a year later, I was doing paid acting work, and it kind of became a second life for me. This was a transformational phase, and one of the actresses I ran into playing Vinny in The Odd Couple, you know, in the TV or in the movie version, he was kind of a mousy little guy, and he is kind of that you know, goody guy that's always trying to please his wife, has to take off early and is all prissy and stuff like that. Anyway, I was playing Vinny in The Odd Couple in Loveland, Colorado. And if you know anything about that play, you have long stretches of the play where it's just the 2 leads, Oscar and Felix, on stage having this sort of interesting relationship where they're both newly divorced and kind of moved in together and sort of become kind of like a homosexual couple, which I think is the undercurrent of the thing of exploring homosexual relationships in an era. The movie came out in the 60s when that wasn't something you talked about. But at any rate, off stage during this production, one of the gals that played one of the Pigeon sisters, the occasional date interest of the 2 guys, she suggested that, you know, I told her, wow, you know, all my problems, I'm overweight, and I you know, I don't have a lot of energy. I wish I could do more of this acting stuff. And she suggested going to a naturopath that did this weird Indian technique called NAET, Natrum Bad something technique. And it was strange. It was like electromagnetic allergy detection and cure, where they would take substances and have you hold them in your hand and see if your strength of your arm went up or down by trying to hold your arm up and see if I can push it down. And it seemed like voodoo to me, but it worked. They found a bunch of sensitivities I had and put me on an Asian vegetarian diet for about 3 months. Said no more beer, no more starchy foods, breads and stuff like that, no more sugars. And gradually I was able to add those things back into my diet, but literally within a year I was down to my lowest weight since early high school years. And I felt great. I had incredible energy, and I was acting up a storm, and it was like I was a whole new person. this was a turning point in my life before I even got into this spiritual kick. And my life has been like that. It's been a set of ups and downs, twists and turns like you wouldn't believe. Some of them were extremely dark, and there were other times where I was very, very close to suicide. Because things had, you know, imagine being stuck in Hong Kong with your new wife in China, a job waiting for you, which is why you were stuck in Hong Kong, because you needed more pages in your passport so you could get a work visa to stay in China. And you get caught by your ex, who was afraid that you'd stop paying alimony. Got pulled in. I went to the embassy to get my new pages. They stole my passport, took me to this room, and grilled me like I was some fucking terrorist, because my ex had gotten me put on the no-fly list. Imagine that. Somebody who'd never committed a crime, who had never done anything unpatriotic, suddenly is treated like a terrorist. I was distraught, to say the least. I had to stay about 4 weeks in Hong Kong, wondering if I was ever going to get back to my wife, how I was going to move forward. And I nearly jumped in front of a train during that time. It was that bad. So, if you're facing anything similar right now, and I know many, many people are, with the economy, the new pandemics, all this violence that's going on with the Tesla riots and the Palestinian riots and all of the dark people trying to destroy your country, what's going on with the immigrant situation in Europe, these assholes who come in and take advantage of very liberal benefits and then start complaining about it, that, oh, you gotta let us practice Sharia law here. Fuck that. They don't even practice Sharia law here in Indonesia. Why are you suddenly supposed to let Muslims run your country? It's absolutely insane, and it's absolutely evil. Anybody who supports it is absolutely a satanic asshole. Like old Helen there and Helena. I don't think they're half of them. Half of their leadership is even human. At any rate, I'm kind of rambling now. I'm going to cut this one short. Like, share, subscribe, comment, question, whatever you want. Interact in any way you want. I'm a pretty easy going, open guy. But I'm not going to pull any punches for you. If you don't like what I'm saying, go ahead and say so. And I will tell you, I'm sorry. This is what I think. This is what I'm going to continue to say, and nothing is going to change my mind about that, because I have studied this stuff in detail. I have the knowledge, I have the facts, and I have my experience and my intuition. And I'm not going to change that for anybody. I don't care how many times you try to put me in a mental hospital, how many times you try to shut me up. Okay? So, till next time, this is Rob Trump with the Omnist Hour telling you, happy karma.